So I've been seeing the terms dead stock, dead lot, jewelry a lot lately. And I even got a comment from one of you asking if I could explain that and go into more detail exactly what dead lot is or dead stock is as it relates to jewelry. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. Now, I don't know if you're familiar with these terms, but if you're not, don't worry because I am going to explain to the best of my knowledge what I believe these types of lots or these types of jewelry sellers, terms, keywords that people are using nowadays. And I want to make sure that there's no confusion and there's no lack of clarity or maybe misunderstanding or misrepresentation. So we're going to go into that today, jewelry friends. Hello, my name is Desiree, and you know that I am your jewelry reselling bestie. So, like I said, today we're going to go in depth about the terms deadlock and dead stock. Now, sometimes I've heard people use these interchangeably as it relates to clothing, but I've never really heard the terms implied directly to jewelry. And for those of us who are working towards building a successful, thriving jewelry reselling business, one of the things we need to get really, really clear about is our sourcing. And so when we are looking to buy jewelry in bulk or we are looking to buy lots, maybe for reselling, maybe for gift giving, whatever the case may be, then we need to make sure that we are really zeroed in on exactly what it is that we're looking for. All right. So I want to, like I said, really communicate what my understanding and my own, um, I guess, experience as it relates to dead stock and dead lots concerning jewelry. And then that way, if you hear or see these terms being used, you have a much clearer understanding of exactly what you're getting or what the seller is actually selling. So before we go into that, I like to remind you to make sure you visit our websites, jewelryresellerspodcast.com, also goodgreatfabulous.com, all right, because over there I've got lots of goodies for you. And um, things are going to be changing really soon. So if you're not subscribed to the channel, make sure that you do that because I know a lot of you watch the videos, but when I look at my analytics, I see that a lot of you are watching, but you're not subscribed. So, like I said, we've got some big things planned, and I can't wait to share them with you. So, please give this channel a subscribe, or if you're listening to the audio version, please make sure you follow so you don't miss out. I promise you, it's going to be it's going to be exciting and it's going to be a lot of fun. All right, so let's go ahead and get into today's topic because, like I said, um, today I decided to focus on this specific topic because I did get a comment on one of my videos. One of you asked me, what exactly is dead lot or what exactly is dead stock. And like I said earlier, I've heard the term used pretty much exclusively as it relates to clothing. But now we're starting to see sellers, especially on Whatnot, use these terms or these titles in some of their live shows. And so there is some confusion as it relates to, are these pieces vintage? Are these pieces new? Is there something different about what a dead stock or dead lot is when it applies to jewelry? So um, it may it may be confusing, but like I said, the point of today's episode is to eliminate all of that confusion because using the term, I believe that sometimes sellers are trying to make their lots sound more valuable, more unique than what they actually are. Now, that's sometimes, that's not all of the times. Okay. So, we're going to get into the real definition, like I said, to the best of my knowledge and my understanding. We're also going to talk about some misconceptions versus what really, what really constitutes or, what we can consider deadlock or dead stop. Also, how to spot quality versus junk if you are considering buying some of this for your jewelry resale business, and why this matters now because I think this is kind of the start of a new trend And I don't want to say whether it's good or bad, but there's just so much confusion, and I think that's not really good. But um, for those of us who do plan on doing this for a while, we're going to change that, right? We're going to set the tone of our expectations, not only as buyers, when we're looking for inventory, but also as sellers, when we're trying to sell some of these pieces that we purchased for resale. Okay, so that's kind of the direction we're going today. Now let's go ahead and get right into the definition of dead stock or dead lot. Like I said, I've heard both of those terms. Basically, this is jewelry that was manufactured years ago, but it never sold at full retail price. Now, this could be vintage depending on how long ago it was. All right. So, from my understanding, dead stock or dead lot is inventory that was actually put out on the retail sales floor. And for whatever reason, those jewelry pieces did not sell. Now, the other aspect of dead stock or dead lot jewelry is maybe it could be excess inventory or excess stock. So let's say Macy's bought 100 pieces of a certain type of bracelet, but maybe only 40 of those pieces sold. And so the other 60 were sitting in the back room, forever, however long. And those pieces eventually were considered dead stock because Macy's just didn't sell enough of them to warrant putting more out on the sales floor. So that is what I know and what I believe to be dead stock or dead lot as it relates to jewelry. Now, if you know something different, or if you are familiar with these terms and I'm totally off base or off the mark, please don't hesitate to correct me and let me know, because I want to make sure that the information I'm giving you is as accurate and is as up to date as possible. Okay, so basically, dead stock or dead lot jewelry sat in warehouses. Maybe it was part of distributor inventory, or maybe even a jewelry store's back room until it eventually got liquidated. Now, sometimes dead stock will sit in the back room of a retail store, and then maybe that store owner will decide never to try and sell it again. And so it may go into storage where it'll sit maybe for years, and then finally it gets liquidated. And so it's also what has been called, I think, new old stock. All right. I'm sure some of you have heard that term as it relates to clothing and clothing resale. So sometimes these pieces could be decades old, which would make them vintage, depending on, again, how long ago or how long they've been sitting in unsold inventory. All right. So basically, dead stock or dead lot jewelry is unsold stock. And sometimes, too, it may not ever hit the sales floor, the retail space. It may be something where there was a flaw, or maybe the packaging had misprints on it, because I've seen that too, where sometimes there's absolutely nothing wrong with the jewelry, but the tags had a typo on it, or maybe it was they were damaged, or maybe they were not quite exactly what the original manufacturer had intended as it relates to quality. And it doesn't necessarily mean something is wrong. It just means that it did not meet the particular quality standards. And so it was deemed unsellable. And so for whatever reason, it just sat in a back room or a storage unit for years. All right. So now sometimes we will get confused because jewelry sellers, or maybe jewelry resellers, will sometimes mislabel dead stock or dead lot as junk or leftovers. But technically, it's more about the fact that it's just unsold inventory. And sometimes it's wholesale inventory. And it's not always about it being junky or damaged or broken goods. Now, sometimes that could come into play, but not always. And so there's still some deals that could be had. And there's still some, I believe, it's going to be worth it for us to at least investigate a little bit more when we see these terms and when we see sellers using those terms to try and offload or move maybe large quantities of inventory. Now, the other thing about dead stocks or dead lot jewelry is that sometimes it could be hundreds or thousands of pieces of the same exact item. So you have to really look at what the seller is selling. Like, are they just selling a variety of different types of rings, or are they selling maybe 500 pieces of the same exact necklace? So these are, things you want to look out for. And you also want to be very clear, especially if you are looking at buying some of this stuff online. Okay. Now, I've heard some people say that they're seeing a lot of sellers on Whatnot advertise their shows, saying that they're selling dead lot or dead stock jewelry. So that could be another opportunity to source. Like I said, I can't recommend it either way because I've never done that, and I've never specifically shopped a dead lot or dead stock show on Whatnot. Not that I'm not against it, I just haven't seen any, at least not yet. But I know some of you out there are starting to see this on Whatnot, and it could be a huge opportunity. So let's get into vintage versus dead stock or dead lots. Now, sometimes it could be vintage, like I said, depending on how long those pieces have been sitting in a back room or in a storage facility somewhere. Sometimes it's not. All right. So remember, if the jewelry pieces were made in the 1980s or earlier, then yes, it qualifies as vintage dead stock. Now, if it's made in the 2000s or the 2010s, it could still be vintage, right? Like it could be, but it may not be. All right. So I don't want you to just automatically assume that dead stock or dead lot equals vintage. It may or it may not. Sometimes these pieces are newer. Again, it just depends on what's being liquidated and what, that particular seller is trying to sell. Now, here is where things can kind of get a little bit blurry because some sellers will label dead stock as vintage, and it may not technically be because, of course, we all know using the keyword vintage tends to attract a lot more buyers and help you make a lot more sales. All right, because a lot of buyers assume that these are pieces that are, from the 70s, 60s, 80s, whatever. And so, again, you're just going to have to be really careful because I hate to make a blanket statement because, every seller is different, everybody's inventory is different. And so you just want to be aware of exactly what it is that they're selling or what they are claiming that they're selling. All right, so a lot of sellers will say vintage on newer dead lot pieces just to attract buyers. I don't think that's a secret. I think, that's something we're all aware of, and it's just something that we have to be careful about. All right, so let's talk about some of the quality of these pieces. Now, I already mentioned earlier that sometimes there's nothing actually wrong with the jewelry. Maybe the packaging, like I said, could have been misprinted. Maybe they made too many. Maybe they just made the wrong color. Like, I don't know. It could be something really minor that doesn't technically affect the quality of the jewelry pieces. And then there could be some dead stock or dead lots where the jewelry is totally, not good. And so, again, you're going to have to really examine what's being sold. All right. Now, there is something known as authentic vintage dead stock. And that, again, is going to determine the age of those pieces. But what I'm learning as I've done a little bit of research about this is that often sterling silver, gold filled, solid gold, and higher end pieces actually could fit in this dead stock category, right? Like there could be some I don't know, Monet pieces that, were just, maybe they made too many and they just didn't sell them all, but they're totally wonderfully, vintage. So, there's the possibility that some of these pieces could be highly valuable and highly sought after and in demand. I'm not going to say there's not. So, again, it's going to have to really take your, observation about what it is the seller is offering. All right. And sometimes there are things that are just mass produced. And so they just don't sell. Maybe there were trending pieces, things that were really trendy back in the 80s or 90s. And so they just made thousands of them, but thousands of them didn't sell. So there's a lot of, I guess, what's the word? Flexibility, ambiguity as it relates to this. And so we just have to be very careful and we just have to be very discerning when we're looking at these pieces. All right, so modern dead stock. Oh, I have this in my notes. Okay, so there's authentic vintage dead stock, and then there's modern dead stock. In other words, you know, dead stock that probably would not qualify as vintage. Maybe it's only 5 years old, maybe it's only 6 years old, 10 years old, whatever the case may be. But don't dismiss that right away because these could also still be some valuable pieces for us as resellers, depending on exactly what it is, what the design is, what the brand is, what the quality is. So, I always say it's worth considering and it's worth taking a look and not finding anything than not looking at all and potentially missing out. All right, so let's go into what modern dead stock is. And I think I kind of already covered this. These are pieces that were probably mass produced in high quantity, but they just did not sell when they were put out on the retail floor. Now, for the most part, and I don't know if I clarified this or said this in the beginning, dead stock or dead lot jewelry pretty much is jewelry that's brand new. In other words, it's not estate, it's not pre owned. It is pretty much jewelry that was brand new, never worn, but also it never sold. All right. So if somebody is saying this is estate dead stock jewelry, well, I guess you could technically do that because maybe a store owner owned it. And so now they're liquidating all of their old inventory. But I think you kind of get the distinction here in the sense that this is not somebody's, personal jewelry collection that they are trying to sell. This, for the most part, and for all intents and purposes of today's episode, these are jewelry pieces that were not pre owned. These were or are jewelry pieces that are technically brand new. All right, so we have to be clear on that when we're describing dead stock or dead lot jewelry. All right, so usually this is mass produced in high quantities, like I said. Sometimes it will be lower quality. Not all the time, but sometimes it will be just mass produced stuff that came in from overseas, and for whatever reason, the quality was bad, or it just didn't sell. Sometimes it'll have really cheap, a cheap quality to it, and so that's why it didn't sell. So it'll have synthetic stones. Sometimes it'll have generic styles. And like I said, just poor manufacturing and poor quality. Now, the other thing about modern dead stock is that these pieces are still very much wearable, but they're not always collectible, and they may not always have a high value or a high resale price, right? So, again, depending on what your business is, what type of jewelry you're looking for as a reseller, this may or may not fit into your inventory system or your inventory strategy. But like I said, it's always worth looking and it's always worth considering because you never know. All right. So, in case I did not make this clear, authentic vintage dead stock usually is higher end stuff. Like I said, it could be brand name jewelry with things with, brands like Monet, whatever, like I said earlier. And they could be sterling silver, gold filled, or higher quality design pieces. And a lot of times, the authentic vintage dead stock is distinct for particular eras of jewelry. So it could be Art Deco, 70s, 90s grunge, things like that. All right, that would be the type of dead stock or dead lot jewelry I would be totally interested in buying, especially 80s and 90s pieces, because, like I may have said in another episode, those pieces are definitely making a comeback and are in huge demand right now. All right, so that's authentic vintage dead stock. Modern dead stock usually is stuff that's mass produced. Sometimes it's just plated metal pieces, and they could still be very pretty and very much wearable, like I said, but they may not necessarily be collectible pieces. But it doesn't mean you can't still make money flipping them if your buy-in price is, good. All right, so moving on in my notes. How do we spot the differences between authentic vintage dead stock and maybe modern newer dead stock? Well, I've kind of already tapped into this. Materials, right? We're always going to look at what the jewelry pieces are made of. Is it precious metals? Is there some real sterling silver? Is there real gold? Is it just plated metals? You really want to do your due diligence as it relates to that to the best of your ability. I know if you're shopping online or sourcing on a whatnot show, that may not be easy. But remember, you can always ask questions too. You also want to look at design clues, era specific details versus just generic mass produced pieces, packaging and labels. Old stock with tags, store boxes, or wholesale packaging is a good sign because that will show you that, yes, this is authentic, new old stock. You may see that, you may not. I like to see that. I have seen that in online auctions where sometimes they'll just put the actual, bags of jewelry still in the wholesale packaging, and they'll sell that whole package unopened. I've seen that. So, you may not see that, but you might. Also, the country of origin. Newer imports are usually marked China, sometimes Thailand, etc. So, you want to be sure that you pay attention to that if you can see or if that is noted somewhere. And I put in my notes too the weight test, but again, if you're shopping online, you may not be able to test that. But if you are watching somebody in a whatnot show live, you can ask, are these weighty pieces, do they feel like they're quality or do they feel lightweight and flimsy? All right. Oh, I have this in my notes about the where dead lot or dead stock comes from. And I think I may have already covered this, but I'll go over it again really quickly since since I'm on this part in my notes. Dead lot comes from retail store closeouts, wholesale liquidations, distributors clearing out old inventory, and estate buyouts that included unsold stock. So remember, that is the one area where I think dead stock could be considered estate. But for the most part, dead stock or dead lot jewelry is jewelry that was not pre owned. So it's new in the sense that it was never sold before. Now, I don't believe that returns would be considered dead stock. And I know you don't really get a lot of, returns as it relates to jewelry, but I'm thinking about like, in clothing, um, when people return clothing, sometimes it's not put back out on the sales floor and it will go like in a pile or something. I don't know, or maybe go into storage to be destroyed. I don't know. But I don't think that happens as much with jewelry because I don't think for as it relates to jewelry, you get a whole lot of returns like that. But I just want to emphasize that dead stock or dead lot is new and not pre-owned. Now, here's where I think we may start seeing more dead stock and dead lot um, jewelry being sold, is because I think we've all kind of seen this where there's a lot more retail stores closing. I know Macy's has closed a bunch of stores. I know a lot of stores in malls are starting to shut down. And so a lot of these stores that sell jewelry will be looking to offload some of these pieces. Now, they could go to outlet stores, of course, but we may start seeing this more, in the resale space, as resellers. We may see jewelry store owners showing up on Whatnot trying to sell some of their jewelry, or just regular, retail stores. I don't know. I don't want to make any predictions because I'm not totally familiar with this, but I wouldn't be surprised as more retail stores close and, as reselling tends to get more mainstream, more popular, and more people are familiar with it, I wouldn't be surprised if we see more dead lot jewelry hitting these reselling platforms. All right, we're already starting to see it on Whatnot. And I'm sure if you probably looked on eBay, I'm sure that there are listings probably already there. Just maybe we never thought to look, specifically using those search terms. All right, so this is becoming a bigger sourcing opportunity, again, depending on what your business model is, what type of inventory you're looking for your jewelry reselling business. All right, so it's something to consider. And at least now you're a little bit more knowledgeable as it relates to what exactly this is. And the thing is, too, is sometimes we have to educate other people too. Not that we're trying to tell somebody how to run their business, but if somebody is selling dead stock or dead lot jewelry, um, we have to make sure that they're being accurate, right? Because like I said, for the most part, this is not pre-owned jewelry. This is jewelry that is brand new that never sold. Okay, so is there an opportunity to profit from dead lot or dead stock jewelry? Absolutely, there is. Absolutely. All right. Because that's what this is all about. You guys know I have no shame in saying that we're in this to make money, and that is the ultimate goal. All right. So, profiting from dead lot jewelry or dead stock jewelry, if it's vintage. So if you happen to be in a position to scoop some of these pieces up, you can market these as new old stock. Now, I know in clothing, with clothing resellers, they tend to do that, but we can apply the same thing as jewelry resellers. All right. Collectors love unopened with tag pieces. Now, I love this too. I love to find new old stock still with the original packaging on it. In my eyes, as a buyer and a seller, that just makes the piece that much more valuable because there's a little bit of validity when you see the original tags, on the piece. And also there's the nostalgia factor too, where you're like, oh, wow, I remember seeing these, back in the day, back in the 90s. I remember seeing these, earrings, wherever. And it's kind of cool to see the original tags and the original price tags even on some of these pieces. And like I said, I think for a lot of us as sellers, it creates another layer of validity in our, selling strategies. All right, so that's vintage. Yes, you can definitely profit off of new old stock. As a matter of fact, I want to say that it's more in demand now than it ever has been. So if you have some of these jewelry pieces, my friends, please make sure that you are asking comparable prices, but also competitive prices too. All right, if it's modern, let's say it's not vintage, new old stock. You can still profit off of this by positioning those pieces as affordable, fashion jewelry or affordable, trendy jewelry, depending on exactly what it is. Now, if it's like really cheap stuff, stuff that probably just isn't worth selling on its own individually, remember, you can always bundle those pieces up and sell them as a craft or junk jewelry lot. All right. So, even if some things are broken, even if some things are kind of missing stones, remember, there's somebody out there who will appreciate it and who will buy it and who will pay you for it. All right. I do also have under my seller strategies, clean cleaning the pieces. For the most part, you probably won't have a lot of cleaning or repair or restoration. Like, you won't have any of that because for the most part, technically these pieces are brand new. Sometimes though, on the cheaper pieces, yes, a stone may fall out, in the packaging. I've seen that happen, or something may get bent or something like that. But for the most part, you won't really have any cleaning or repairs to do. Oh, and also be very careful too that you don't overpay just because somebody uses the word dead lot, or dead stock jewelry. All right. You always want to verify your materials and the style first and make sure that it is something you can make a profit on. All right. Because, like I said, I think that this is kind of a hot term right now, dead stock, dead lot jewelry. And we don't want to get sucked into something that's not going to benefit our business at the end of the day. Okay. So let me make sure I covered everything. I think I did. All right. So the other aspect about this too, which I think is very attractive, is I put this in my notes. There's the sustainability angle of dead lot or dead stock jewelry, right? Circular fashion, giving unsold stock a second chance to be enjoyed and appreciated. As it concerns jewelry, a lot of us are really into that. Also, the trend appeal. Younger buyers are really into retro, new old stock. Like I said, I think that's always hot and it's becoming more so. Um, so, my advice is to really consider this as an option. If you see or if you have an opportunity to buy dead lot or dead stock jewelry, it's not always junk, but it may not always be ideal either. All right. So, this is where you're going to have to do your due diligence and you're going to have to do some research to make sure that this is exactly what you're looking for, or if it's something that can work with your jewelry reselling business. Okay, so sometimes it's looking back at some of these old pieces, sometimes I think of it like a time capsule. Right? Thinking about, wow, this is so cool because this is what actually people were wearing and what people really valued and what was in style, during this time. So I think it's a lot of fun. And like I said, I think it brings back a lot of nostalgic memories for a lot of us who grew up, when maybe some of these pieces were popular and maybe, all of our friends were wearing these pieces and just having a lot of fun with it. So let me make sure I covered everything that I wanted to share with you today. So let me know in the comments. Have you ever bought dead lot or dead stock jewelry and found something surprising? Was it good? Was it bad? Have you seen some of these dead lot jewelry shows on Whatnot? Because I think that's where they're starting to pop up right now. Let me know. I would love to get your feedback and get your experience with dead stock or dead lot jewelry or new old stock or new old inventory. I think those are the terms. So if I learn anything different, I will make sure that I come back and let you all know because I like to keep you up to date on everything that I come across, concerning reselling jewelry building a reselling jewelry business, and also just, jewelry industry news and sometimes reseller news as it applies to what we do. I just like to bring you guys the information because I really do enjoy researching this. I could be like a nerd in that sense, but I really do enjoy this. So, oh, and like I said too, if I got some things wrong as it relates to this topic, please, I am open to correction and I am open to doing a follow up or a part two or whatever I may need to do so I can make sure I give you guys the correct information. But everything that I shared with you today is based on my own knowledge and my own research, and also, just kind of seeing what other sellers are doing in the reselling space. Okay, but like I said, I invite you to let me know if I miss the mark on something because I want to make sure that the information I'm giving you is correct. All right, so that's going to be it for today's episode. Yeah. If you guys have any questions, like I said, please don't hesitate to reach out. And I want to thank you so much for spending this time with me. And I will check in with you again really soon.